Okay, now we're live. So hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're healthy and safe. Welcome to the WIN Forum 2020. Welcome to you wherever you are on this planet. I can see that many of you are connecting from everywhere in the world, many from France. Bonsoir à tous. Spain, Greece, the UK, the US. Wow, thank you for joining the WIN Forum. My name is Catherine Barba. I'm the founder of the WIN Forum. I'm very excited to be with you for a whole week to celebrate diversity in founders, funders, and leaders. It's been 5 years since we have started the WIN Forum together. And I remember, maybe you were here last year, we were 1,000 people in the same room at Parsons New School, celebrating, dancing. And today I'm just here behind my screen alone, some kind of weird, but I hope you will feel like the emotion and the same passion to advance diversity, women in business and inclusion. You know, I do all this because I believe we have a responsibility. I believe I have a responsibility. You have one to be a change maker. I believe that if you want to have an impact, you definitely have to surround yourself with people who are different. You have to surround yourself with people who think different and showing respect for them because all lives matter. So yes, respect, equality, diversity, inclusion, and innovation. That is all what the WIN Forum 2020 is all about right here, right now. One important thing for you to know is that the forum this year is totally free. It's free and you can see 13 live talk for free during the whole week. And it is thanks to our sponsors that I'm very happy to thank today: Vivendi, Euler Hermes, BNP Paribas, Nespresso, IRI Worldwide, and La French Tech. Thank you so much for making this happen. So today we will have 2 live discussions. And they are about confidence. So much in life is about confidence. And I don't know where you are with this topic of self-confidence, but one thing I know is that you have to grow it, you have to build it, and you have, you know, to boost it if you want to achieve great things. So you're ready to boost your confidence today? Okay, we're gonna have a good time. Let me introduce you to our first guest. Is going to join us now. Our first guest is Miriam Merad. She's a pioneering immunologist. She's the Mount Sinai Professor in Cancer Immunology and Director of the Precision Immunology Institute. So Miriam, hi, welcome here. Welcome to WIN Forum. You have developed one of the world's most sophisticated research centers to understand how our human body respond to disease, including COVID-19, and we're going to talk about this. And I'm so happy to welcome you, Miriam, because I believe that as a pioneer in immunology, as a woman in science, as a leader, as a mother, maybe as a wife, I have to ask your husband, but you are really exemplary. You are a model for us. And so to ask you a question, here is with us Nabila Ahmed. Nabila, she's a prominent reporter for Bloomberg Deals. Thank you, Nabila, for joining us and asking questions to Dr. Merad. Nabila, I believe nobody can think where you are. Can you tell us where you are right now?
I am on a small sheep and wheat farm all the way in Australia.
So you are in Australia? Oh my. And what time is it there?
It is, you know what, I always make it the US time. It's actually just after 1 a.m.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh my God. Oh my God, it's bedtime. But anyway, we're gonna have a very energizing conversation. So thank you to the both of you from the bottom of my heart to be here. And we are together for 30 minutes. You're gonna talk for 20 minutes and then every one of you here can ask all your questions to Miriam. So have a great conversation and have fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine, thank you so much. Miriam, welcome. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with you. You're a professor in cancer immunology and the director of the Precision Immunology Institute at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. You were born in Paris, you went to med school in Algeria, and then did your PhD at Stanford University in the US. You're working in tumor immunology, obviously won the prestigious William B. Coley Award a couple of years ago, which was named after the father of cancer immunotherapy. We're so lucky to have you here today.
Thank you.
You've obviously had an amazing career, Miriam. I'd love to start with what got you interested in medicine and science?
So, you know, I was born in Paris, but I went back to Algeria when I was 2 months old, right? So, and the reason I was born in Paris, because my parents, who are both physicians, were doing a fellowship there. So by accident, I was born in Paris, and then they went back, and I was raised in a family of physicians. My uncles were also physicians. My father was a physician. My mother was a pharmacist. So it was quite natural for me. I mean, the hospital environment was quite natural. And I have to say, I loved being in a hospital when I was a child, where I spent a lot of time waiting for my parents, and naturally I wanted to become a physician, and I did medicine in Algeria. And during one of my medical rotation, I became very interested in cancer disease and the treatment of cancer patients. And at that time, we were just starting to use bone marrow transplantation to treat leukemia, which is a sort of a blood cancer. And it was quite remarkable, because for the first time, we're seeing patients being cured with this therapy. So became then interested in bone marrow transplant. I decided to learn more about it. So I decided to do a specialty in oncology, which is the treatment of cancer disease in France. While there, I became very interested to learn more about this successful therapy called bone marrow transplant, which I realized was was really consisted on transplanting immune cells from a donor to a patient. I realized then for the first time that immune cells can be harnessed to get rid of cancer cells the same way they get rid of infected cells. So I stopped my medical career for some time to learn more about the science of immunology and the power of immunology to treat cancer. Then I decided to go to Stanford to do a PhD in immunology. I was supposed to go back to France. I was recruited to New York to build a tumor immunology lab. And 10 years later, I was asked to lead the Immunotherapy Institute, which now includes 42 laboratories, all dedicated to use the immune system to treat human disease, including cancer, but also Alzheimer's disease, atherosclerosis, psychiatric disease. We are all focused on harnessing these, medicine, which we called, the human immune system.
Miriam, what would you say was the biggest obstacle that you faced? And could you tell us a little bit about how you overcame that?
So I thought about this because you had talked to me about obstacle, but I think obstacle is a semantic word, so, and I never really, thought about it this way. And I think about it, I think about challenges or potentially, but even more than challenges, difficult choices that we are faced with in life. And I had several difficult choices to make, which I think shaped my career. And I have to say also, it's important that I say that to the younger people potentially who are listening, is that I had not mapped my career very carefully. I just did what I was excited about at that time. I was very excited about cancer, and then I became excited about this new treatment. And then I realized the new treatment was based on immunology, so I became excited about immunology. And each time I did what excited me without really seeing, the whole trajectory, in my mind. So of course, when I was excited about something, I tried to do it fully and really try to learn it as well as possible. So that's potentially a part of mapping a career. But now obstacle, there are, let's say, difficult choices that I had to make. Was the decision, for example, to not go back to clinical practice. You know, at some point, I was a physician at heart. I loved patients. I still love patients. I loved this capacity to heal, you know, seeing the patients do better because of something that you had done to him, or you and a team. It's very powerful. It's extremely rewarding. But then I realized that our cancer treatment were not optimal, right? So, and I became very interested in the power of immune system to really change cancer care. And at some point when I decided to go to Stanford, the clinical hospital, which were very interested in having me back as a physician in chief, gave me 3 years off to do this science training. So I finished my 3 years, and then they asked me to come back to take a clinical position. They also offered me a small lab, but then at that time I felt I was not ready to go back. So I tried to negotiate, and I really negotiated hard, and they will not give me 1 more year to spend at Stanford. And I decided to let go that position. My parents were very sad. My friends were sad. These guys who were training me, you know, as a physician in France, were sad that I had to let go of the position, but I did it, and I felt lost for a while. I even lost sleep for a while, but I thought it was the right thing to do. And at the end, that was something difficult that I had to do. So I never practiced again, and I missed it for many years. But then, you know, I realized that it was a necessary thing to do if I really wanted to be a little bit more innovative in terms of therapy, and it was difficult to do both. And this is where I, you know, then was recruited to New York, and then build this research, which is now going back to patients. So somehow it is selfish to just wanting to really cure yourself. There are many people that can do it, but that effort that was important to me is still happening, you know, this translation to patients. So you can call it an obstacle, because when I refused that position to go back, I had no idea whether I would be hired anywhere, right? I took another year at Stanford, and then, you know, I was going to look for jobs, you know, so somehow I was, you know, I didn't have very clear perspective on the future.
But you were very brave.
Yeah, I was brave. Well, I didn't feel brave. I have to say I was very anxious. So no, I didn't feel brave. I just felt I just couldn't go back, you know, and and when, you know, and I see it, you know, it happens all the time. You know, our laboratory are full of these foreigner students that are coming from all over the world. It's quite, you know, talking about diversity. Come and see diversity in action in American biology labs, you know. 80% of the fellow, not the students, which are often American, but the fellows are foreigners. And all of them go through exactly, you know, the same type of decision. At some point, if they want to take a job, there are job offered in their city where they come from, and they have either to go back or they have to stay. And I see them going through the same type of decision, and some decide to go back and some stays. And those that stay are as anxious that they go back. You know, you know, each of us take the decision that we think are best for us. It doesn't mean that I felt brave at that time, but right now I think, yes, it was a good decision. It might have been fantastic to go back to France, I don't know, but it was tough. But I, and then there is a series of additional decisions that you have to do in your life, right? That are, and some will call them, oh, that was a terrible obstacle. They didn't let me finish my science at Stanford or here in New York when they are asked to go back. And I tell them, it's your choice. It is your choice. No one, you know, it's an obstacle potentially, but you can decide not to call it an obstacle. You can decide it's a choice that is now offered to me. I can go back, which is great. You know, someone wants you back. Or you decide I'm not ready to go back and I want to continue to learn more because I don't feel that, you know, I've learned enough yet, even if it was sufficient for that job. And it's up to us. We always have a choice. Often, of course, you know, here I'm not talking about financial burden that, you know, so, you know, in my field, those type of decision, you always have the choice. Is it whether you choose security or you choose to go, you know, where your intellectual pursuits are. And this is what, you know, it's important to think about it very clearly. And I talk about this with my trainees all the time.
Looking back, was there one piece of advice that really stuck with you, or is there one bit of advice that you would have for the younger people tuning in today? who are trying to make these sorts of decisions about their careers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there are several advice I would say. You know, the first thing is that get engaged fully in what you do, no matter what you do. You know, I say that to my kids, is that when you go and cook something, just do it, engage into whatever you do, because you'll be much better at it, and also you'll be much more excited about it. So one advice, you know, my biggest role model in life is my mother. You know, my mother had led a fantastic career. She's a mother of 4. She's you know, a very accomplished scientist. She was an Arabic woman living in post-independent Algeria, and she's politically engaged. She taught me to be a civil servant, and she always said, you know, be ambitious and rigorous. So don't cut corner, be ambitious and rigorous. So this is the best advice. In whatever you do, see big, you know, be ambitious. But then there have been many things that struck me in my career. But, is that, you know, so one thing I remember, you know, happening to me, which probably affected me a lot, is that, so I was at Stanford, a young, you know, student, young, not in age, because I did my a PhD in immunology after finishing my residency in oncology in France. And then I went and spent 3 years to do a PhD in immunology, to learn immunology from scratch. But I was a young in science. And I obtained a set of results that were new. So I looked at them, and then I shared them with another scientist who was much more established than me. And he looked at me and he said, you know that you can become the world expert in this particular question. It was a small question in science, and he told me this, and I was extremely inspired by this. I somehow thought, wow, you know, I could, in fact, if I continue this way, me, this little scientist, just starting science, I could become the world expert. And somehow it just created, you know, some, you know, extra motivation, or somehow it transformed or built my confidence. We were talking about confidence. So that was one piece. And I would say, so to all of us, you know, and I see it in my training, sometimes I say that to my training, I said, you know, if you keep doing this, you can transform current knowledge. And some are very receptive, and some are not that receptive. You know, they don't believe me, or they are not confident. You know, let yourself be receptive. Let yourself be flattered. You know, if someone believes in you, then just take it, you know, and use it to continue to build yourself. And then later on, you know, I was a junior faculty here at Sinai, and I was, you know, I had published a nice paper, and there was a lot of press around it, and then I did something. I built a project here, and the dean of my school saw me in the corridor. I remember I was, you know, I was still a junior faculty by, you know, academic standards, and he told me, you know, I meant to ask you to come and see me because I want you to think about a leadership position at Sinai. You know, and I had never thought about a leadership position. I had my lab, which I thought was, you know, enough of a burden. But I just stuck in me, and I thought, wow, you know, I could be a leader somehow. And again, so it is, I reacted the same way. And so I will say to you know, to those scientists that want, you know, to build this career, is let yourself be inspired. You know, if someone, you know, listen, because some people will see in you, you know, it's very difficult to build confidence in science. There is decades of science, of extraordinary scientists before us. Very difficult to think that we can add anything, you know, and I understand that very well. And but some people that are older than us, you know, see something in us, they listen to that. So this was where I thought, not advice, but things that happened that probably gave me the courage to really go and continue full force and become a scientist, a real scientist.
I mean, that is an issue that women in many fields have talked about and go through. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience of being a woman in science, and how you sort of forced yourself to overcome that in a way that, you know, you did start to believe when people were trying to inspire you that you could go ahead and do it?
Yeah.
And overcoming those doubts?
Yeah, so it is true that women in science are often less secure, you know, and it did happen to me. We feel less secure than men in science. I didn't really understand it very well, until I started to read, for example, we all had to read what's called a personal statement, in our CV. You may have seen it in my CV. It's asked, it's this NIH standard type of CV. So we write about us. We write about how, what we contribute, our contribution. They ask us to write about our contribution to science. In fact, it's labeled like this. We have a section on contribution to science. And then when I read the contribution to science, women scientists or men scientists in the same field, and I know their contribution, regardless of their sex, I know what they've done, now. Women never portray themselves the same way that men do, and men do. And it's so true, so, and I had realized that, when I did find something at Stanford that now is well recognized in my field, and I was timid about it. I will discuss the discovery, always putting it, always making sure that I explained to everyone that it was incremental. It was because of the discovery of others, because I was afraid to be too transformative, right? Because I thought, people will not believe me. It was too odd, right? And women have the tendency to do that. Men don't, and I'm, of course, generalizing. I have many men trainees that needs more confidence also. So this is broad generality, but I am now a director of an institute with 42 labs, and I see that in my women faculty. They behave, they're always more timid. And that deserved me. So as a woman, often I realized I was not invited to give the keynote speech. I was not always invited. And some of my men colleagues will be, much more present in meetings. So, we have now built the no to the manel. Manel is all a panel made of men only. And, and we are fighting against this because it is always easier to invite a man than inviting a woman. So we have to fight that. But otherwise, I have to say there is many opportunity now for women. We see it, we are in demand, in both in academia, in industry, there is everyone, there is I think there is a realization that we need gender balance. And some women, tell me that they I'm not sure that they like it. They feel that it diminishes them. And I will say, use these opportunities, right? If you feel you were hired because of a gender balance things, who cares? Take the job, and slightly because of your science also. So there is now much more opportunity than there were potentially 20 years ago, but there is always potentially these tendency, maybe not to recognize women in us, although I think it has changed. But it's up to us. It's up to us not to listen to that, and it's up to us also to portray ourselves the same way our male colleagues do.
Now, your team has obviously been doing a lot of research into this novel coronavirus. Could you tell us a little bit about how you view the pandemic from here on in, and also, do you expect that the delays with the pandemic to set back your trials for trials in oncology, and what risks that might pose?
Yeah, so COVID-19, is still an immunological disease. Patients are dying because they don't mount an immune response against the virus. So for us, it is a very interesting question. Beyond, interesting scientifically, of course, there's also an urgency to find a cure, and we are extremely touched by all the casualties that happen in the population. So we are very anxious, in fact, to find answers that are relevant to the disease. But it is a question that we are very interested in. So what we did very early during the pandemics is that we stopped completely all research, but we had to close the lab, because of the social distancing. But we never really closed our lab because we redeployed all the immunology power at Mount Sinai to really serve the questions. So we've had all of our trainees and the faculty really trying to understand, use the immunological knowledge to understand why patients, why patients were dying of this disease. Clearly patients that are vulnerable, the obese patient, the patients with diabetes, the patients with hypertension, the patients of an older age were dying more, but we also were seeing patients who didn't have comorbidity dying of this virus infection. And we really quickly realized that they were dying because of a hyperinflammatory response. And my lab and many labs here at Sinai work on exactly that question, which is this dysregulated immune response that can contribute to inflammatory disease, or they can also dampen dampen cancer response or promote cancer progression because it's a bizarre type of inflammation that make, in fact, cancer cell grow. So this is exactly what we studied. So what we did is we built an enormous effort to, in fact, follow our patients. At some point at Sinai, we had 8 patients hospitalized in Mount Sinai Health System, 2,000 patients hospitalized in main campus where I am. So what we did is we redeployed an army of people, including trainees, but not only trainees, also some research coordinators and administrators to really go and collect blood samples from all the hospitalized patients. And we collected samples every day to learn about their disease. And we've been working nonstop for 8 weeks, I have to say, or more than that. Some of our people have been working more than 20 hours a day for weeks to try to understand this cause of mortality. And the reason was, if we understand why they die, we can just stop that, even if we don't have a vaccine yet, so that we can reduce casualty among patients while the curative and the preventive treatments will be developed. So this is what we've been doing. And it did, in fact, had to stop all the studies on cancer. I have to say, it breaks my heart that my studies on cancer are stopped. But the hope is that we'll be reopening soon. I mean, we have reopened last week at 25% capacity, and then we are using the social distancing measure so that we work throughout the day. In fact, some are coming in the middle of the night to do experiments, and we will be continuing to, resuming some of our cancer studies soon.
Thank you. We're going to move to Q&A because we are running out of time and there are a lot of questions for you.
Okay.
And you start with a question about your mentors. So outside of, you said your mother was a great role model for you. Outside of her, who were your main mentors and what did you learn from them? This is the first question that we have today.
So I had two. So in addition to my mother, we don't have much time, so I don't want to give her all the credit. But in addition to my mother, I met a phenomenal cancer immunologist in Paris called Laurence Didvogel, who in fact gave me the courage to go to the States and stop my clinical activities and dive into research. And she's extraordinary and fantastic cancer immunologist, and she's also working on COVID now. And then I met a fantastic, I had many, people that I met along the way. This is like going back to let yourself be inspired. But I met a fantastic scientist called Irv Weissman, probably one of the most, the famous scientists in hematopoiesis, who taught me how to do it all. He was a guy who had a family, had an enormous lab, had many friends, loved fishing and loved music and loved politics. And he taught me that you can do it all. And I was afraid to, have to become this nerdy scientist and not being able to do anything else. And indeed, I had a family, I had many friends. He loved to cook, he loved parties. And he's a phenomenal scientist with a very refined, intellect. And so he had a dramatic impact on my career. Still has, I was with him on Zoom not too long ago, and he still intimidates me scientifically and inspires me.
Absolutely. And so now we have a specific question from a student who's studying immunology, doing a PhD in immunology, asking, would you have any advice for seeking a postdoc position as there are so many good labs? And what do you expect from a postdoc if someone applies to your lab?
So a postdoc position is a position that finds you, so it helps you identify your niche on which you are going to work for many years, to come. So what you have to do is to find a lab that has, the records of first good publication and for having brought, brought postdocs, to independent positions. It's very important. So the matrix is very simple, right? You have to identify labs where you can develop as a scientist and find a job. So you have to know whether that lab, has been able to do that for prior postdocs. And then you have to find a fit, an intellectual fit, and also a personal fit. The postdoc, when I interview them, they come and spend the whole day with us. They give a talk. They go to lunch with some of the trainees. They go to dinner with us, and they spend the whole day. And then I invite them to talk to us again. You have to have a personal fit, personality fit, and then an intellectual fit. And the lab, has to be able to, show that they brought postdocs to, what they wanted to be.
Miriam, the next question is about globalization and what's going on in the world at the moment, and how worried you are about anti-globalization. We're seeing the world sort of constricting a bit, and how that hinders global cooperation when it comes to advancing the science of immunology.
Well, so I am afraid of anti-globalization, but more than that, I'm afraid. So let's talk a little bit about politics, because it's important to do that, right? And diversity. So first, science thrives, so science is the most diverse community that you can think of, right? So we have seen that regardless of race, age, genes, we can see, an extraordinary idea that can transform the course of any scientific discourse coming from any country in the world, right? And as long as you provide, the right environment. So in my lab, I have 12 nationalities, 4 different religions, including, atheists, no religious people, and we all come together and have the same passion. And this is very conducive, to discoveries. This idea that we all share the same passion, but we have come from different school of thought, and this is extraordinary. So these people then will go back to their country or different countries, in fact, and this is what globalization is about, right? So we are, wherever we are, we think about the same problems. We, we share knowledge, and this is how, we can, I think society can improve, right? This recent decision that we should, this American first attitude is just the opposite, of, the opposite of greatness, So if you want to make America great, the opposite of it will be to think about America first, because, science, we've seen it. COVID is a perfect example of that, right? So you can say, well, I'm going to try to protect America and have the best science here. If you don't stop the pandemic, in China, you don't stop the pandemic in Africa, then your society, the American society, will be doomed. It was the same for HIV. It's the same for climate change, right? It's the same for, look at the Syrian refugee, right? If we don't have Syria develop, then Europe and potentially America will also suffer from it. So even with a complete selfish perspective, you should help others, right? And scientists know that very well, right? So we know that we can learn from each other. We can learn from how patients in Africa, we've seen, African patients are developing a very different type of outcome after this COVID-19. Let's learn from this. There is so much to discover by studying, other communities. And this idea that we can, in the 21st century, be independent of each other is just wrong. And it's just not understanding history and not reading about history. So as scientists, scientists know how to think about data-driven policies. We look at data, remove the emotion, right? And all the political discourse here. We are only driven by data. So scientists, I urge you all, who are listening to us, go into office, and then, so political science, I would say, should just be, I cannot be too provocative because this is a nice forum, but I think there's no reason why we need only political scientists to lead. Scientists should be the one to lead. We see it, in Germany, the best response that the country developed, a rational, data-driven response was the response in Germany, and you see how this crisis was in fact dealt with, very well because it was dealt with rationally. So yes, I am afraid about anti-globalization. I'm afraid about all these anti-diverse discourse. These are, have been used throughout history again and again. And we know that they always lead to trouble. So it is ridiculous to be thinking about anti-globalization when we can harness it now and think about ways of protecting community by harnessing, global knowledge. It is possible to do it. Let the scientists guide us.
And I hope leaders of today will heed that advice, Miriam. I feel like that's a topic we could have a whole other separate discussion on. But for today, we are out of time. So I'm going to hand you over to Catherine. Thank you so much for your time. Really
My pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Miriam. There are so many questions on Facebook and on Zoom. There is one last question I would like to ask you very shortly. What are your links with scientists in Algeria? And you must be an inspiration for so many young people there.
Well, I have some, I go to Algeria, I go back to Algeria every year where I teach immunology regularly. In fact, I was going there on June 24th, but it has just been canceled because of COVID. So I don't know whether I am an inspiration, but I love young scientists all over the world. And definitely I like to talk to Algerian scientists.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, Nabila, for your time. What I keep from this conversation is that your engagement, your passion, and your message of being engaged, being ambitious, and that's a great message for women in leadership. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to everyone for attending this panel. In 20 minutes, we'll have another session on confidence with entrepreneurs. So at 12:30 p.m. New York time, please stay with us. And Miriam, Nabila, thank you again. And I'll remember for a long time what you said to us today. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for having me. Ciao.